Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So we are continuing with Caitanya Caritamrta Adi Leela, Chapter 2, Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, verse number 63. Vadanti tat tattvavidastatvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. Vadanti, they say, tat, that, tattvavidaha, learned souls, tattvam, the absolute truth, yat, which, jnanam, knowledge, advayam, non-dual, brahma, brahman, iti, thus, paramatma, paramatma, iti, thus, bhagavan, bhagavan, iti, thus, shabdyate, is known. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth say that it is non dual knowledge and it is called impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and the personality of Godhead. Purport. This text is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 11. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So when we go to this verse which Prabhupada is referring to in the purport, it says that learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagwan. Purport. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagwan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan or the personality of Godhead is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is a partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. So Prabhupada gives very nice purport to this beautiful verse. And again, we see that, there is a repetition about the three aspects of the Supreme Lord, that is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And all these three aspects, they are qualitatively one and the same. That's why it's called non-dual. And that Prabhupada mentions that the same Brahman realization by students of Upanishads is the same Paramatma that is realized by the yogis and Bhagavan by the devotees. We have heard this many times. The reason being the repetition is there so that we can understand and we can contemplate on this, that these are the three levels, three aspects. Where do we want to be? Do we want to be just a student of Upanishad, or do we want to be just a yogi, or do we want to be a devotee, right? Very nice analogy Prabhupada gives about the sun rays, the sun planet, and sun god, right? Similarly, we have heard another analogy where it's the engine of the train, then it is the one compartment. No, first it's the headlight of the train, then it's the engine, and then all the compartments. So the full realization is of that full train, which includes the light, the engine, and the compartments. So Prabhupada gives this nice analogies, and then the devotees, of course, they know all these features of the three aspects or the three features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 64. Shuna bhai ye shloka karah vichara eka mukhya tattvatina tahara prachara. Translation. My dear brothers, kindly listen to the explanation of this verse and consider its meaning. The one original entity is known in his three different features. Kindly listen. It's not an order, it's a request. I don't know if you all have noticed in our day to day life, when we are conversing with someone else, there's a different reaction for that from that other person when we order or when we request. Have you noticed that? Right? When we request, we get a pleasant response, but when we order, then there is, the defensive mechanism comes in, like, oh, who are you to order me? So here we see how nicely it is said, kindly listen. So listening is better than hearing. Now, what is the difference between the two? Hearing is we are hearing and it's coming out from the other ear. Listening means we are paying attention to what we are hearing. You see? So, listening is better than hearing, right? Paying attention. And that's why here there's a request kindly, which means wherever your mind is gone, please bring it back. Please bring it back to Caitanya Caritamrta, this chapter where it is talking about Lord Chaitanya being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So kindly listen and consider its meaning. So, hearing, listening, contemplating, discussing with other devotees, and that will lead to remembrance. Then we will remember these verses, not like memorize it kind of, but at least we will understand the purport of these verses. So it's a humble request even by Srila Prabhupada. He's in the parampara, and we see here Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who's also in the parampara, is requesting kindly listen. He doesn't say kindly hear. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said, Tachruno. He's telling Arjuna, please hear. Here, Sutta Goswami, of course, there also Krishna meant, please listen carefully, kindly listen, because I'm giving you the knowledge that can help us, go back to the spiritual world. So here it is a very humble request to kindly listen. Verse 65. Advaya Jnana Tattva Vastu Krishnera Swarupa Brahma Atma Bhagavan Tina Tanra Rupa. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna himself is the one undivided absolute truth, the ultimate reality. He manifests himself in three features as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Purport. In the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam cited above, it's the same verse, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 11. The principal word Bhagavan indicates the personality of Godhead, and Brahman and Paramatma are concomitants deduced from the absolute personality, as a government and its ministers are deductions from the supreme executive head. In other words, the principal truth is exhibited in three different phases: the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna Bhagavan, is also known as Brahman and Paramatma, although all these features are identical. That's the ultimate reality, right? Material world is it's a relative world. Material world is not reality. Again, we see there is a mention of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, right? Three features of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Now, Parashar Muni, he gave a very nice verse which explains the qualifications of the Supreme Lord, all the opulences that the Supreme Lord possesses in full. He says, Aishwarasya Samagrasya, Virasya Yashashriya. Samagrasya means in full. So the Supreme Lord is a personality is called a Supreme Lord when that personality has or possesses six opulences in full, right? These are the qualifications of the Supreme Lord. And we see that Krishna, the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has these six opulences in full, right? And he is the one, it says in the purport that Brahman and Paramatma, they are deduced from Bhagavan, like the ministers from the executive head. So the absolute truth is identical in all three aspects. It's the same Lord in the form of Brahman, Paramatma, or it is the Bhagavan feature. But the devotees, they worship the Bhagavan feature of Lord, which is Lord Sri Krishna. That's why you will see that in the temples, when we go, we don't worship Brahman, right? It's not that in on the altar there's just light and we are worshiping that, right? We don't do that. We are not worshiping just the Paramatma, but we worship the Bhagavan feature, the supreme personality of Godhead. So from this we can understand that it is important to understand these three features, the three aspects of the Supreme Lord. Verse number 66. এই শ্লোকেরা अर्थे তুমি হাইলা নির্বচনা আর এক শুনা ভাগবতেরা vachana. Translation. The import of this verse has stopped you from arguing. Now listen to another verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Again, listen, not just hear, but listen. The import of this verse has stopped you from arguing. What does that mean? It means that when we are hearing the bona fide scripture from bona fide authority, all the bona fide acharyas, when we are hearing from Srila Prabhupada, who is a bona fide spiritual master in the disciplic succession, then if we are really understanding it, then there is no question of argument, right? Saying this verse has stopped you from arguing. Now listen to another verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can see, like Srila Prabhupada used to say, that if somehow or the other we can read or hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Caitanya Caritamrta, nectar of devotion, nectar of instruction, we are in good hands. Then if we can just absorb this knowledge from these scriptures, then we will be able to become self-realized. Verse number 67. Ete cham shakala pumsa krishnastu bhagavan swayam indrari vyakulam lokam mridyanti yuge yuge. This, it would be nice if you have not yet memorized this verse, if you can memorize this. This is a very, very, very important verse. Why? Because this gives a reference for those who do not believe in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a reference which clearly states that Krishna is Bhagavan. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. All these incarnations of Godhead are either plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions of the Purusha avatars. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. In every age, he protects the world through his different features when the world is disturbed by the enemies of Indra. Purport. This statement of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse 28, definitely negates the concept that Sri Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu or Narayana. Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, the supreme cause of all causes. This verse clearly indicates that incarnations of the personality of Godhead, such as Sri Ram, Narasimha, and Varaha, are all undoubtedly belong to the Vishnu group, but all of them are either plenary portions or portions of plenary portions of the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Very, very clear. So we have Shastric evidence. We have evidence from the Shastras that clearly tell us that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here Prabhupada makes it clear. This negates the concept that Krishna comes from Vishnu. This is very popular in India, where people, say that Vishnu is the original personality and Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. No, it is the other way around. That's why it's clearly saying Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam. Swayam means you yourself are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what does he do? Paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya cha dushkritam. He protects the devotees and he annihilates the miscreants. And he very clearly tells us in chapter 18 also, where he says, Ma suchaha, do not fear. He gives a guarantee of protection. So here, very nicely, Prabhupada states this reference to show us that Krishna is not an incarnation. And this statement that Krishna is a Supreme Lord is based on the scriptures. It is not a speculation. And all others, like it is mentioned, Sri Ram, Narsimha, Varaha, they are all either incarnations, portions of Krishna, plenary portions, expansions. They all come from Krishna. And Prabhupada says that these incarnations, they belong to the Vishnu group, but all of them come from Krishna. What did we hear in Bhagavad Gita? Aham sarvasya prabhava, right? Mattaha sarvam pravartate. Krishna says, I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. Verse number 68. Saba avatarera kari samanya lakshana tara madhye Krishna chandera kari laganana. Translation. The Bhagavatam describes the symptoms and deeds of the incarnations in general and counts Sri Krishna among them. Yes, we have noticed that. If you remember, when there are the 10 prominent incarnations of Krishna, of the Lord, Krishna is one of them. So people think that Krishna also is an incarnation. No, counts among them doesn't mean that he is not the source of those incarnations. That is important to remember. 69. Tabe sutta goshani mane pana bada bhaya yara ye lakshana taha karila nischaya. Translation. This made Sutta Goswami greatly apprehensive. Therefore, he distinguished each incarnation by its specific symptoms. Now, Sutta Goswami, he became apprehensive, means he became anxious. He's like, oh, here it's saying that Krishna is among those incarnations. So he, became anxious. So he wanted to distinguish it. And Sutta Goswami is coming in strict disciplic succession. So because of that, he is very compassionate. and he wanted to distinguish it for us. Otherwise, what would have happened? We would have said, oh, this verse says that, Krishna is among them, so Krishna is also an incarnation. No. So that we do not have any more doubts, Sutta Goswami wants to distinguish. He's really anxious to do that. That is a quality a devotee should have, to be anxious to distribute this knowledge to the general public, to somehow or the other reach out whomsoever we meet, whether it is on the phone or whether it is in person, which is not very common nowadays because of COVID-19, but somehow or the other, reach out and spread this knowledge. Verse number 70. Avatara Sabha Purushera Kala Amsha Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Sarva Avatamsa. Translation. All the incarnations of Godhead are plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions of the Purusha avatars. But the primeval Lord is Sri Krishna. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of all incarnations. So here we see that a reference is being given for us. What is that reference? That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the source of all. That is why it's called the fountainhead of all incarnations. So there should be no doubt in our minds, or when we are preaching to others, we can remove the doubts of those people who think, excuse me, who think that Krishna comes from Vishnu and that Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the source of all incarnations. No. Here we have another reference to explain to the general public that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the source of all incarnations. Text 71. पूर्व पक्ष कहे तुम्हारा भालत व्याख्यान परव्योमा नारायण स्वयं भगवान. Translation. An opponent may say, this is your interpretation, but actually the Supreme Lord is Narayana, who is in the transcendental realm. Yes, this is how people will interpret. They will, and not only that, they will say it is your interpretation. You're telling us we are interpreting? No, this is your interpretation. It is your opinion. It is your idea. No. That is why Srila Prabhupada wants us to give references from the scriptures. That, okay, if someone is saying that, bring up all the verses, like Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Nadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. There is a proof, reference from the scriptures that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. Then Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita says, Bhuktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwara, Maha Ishvara. He is the Ishvara of all the Ishvaras. He is the Maha Ishvara. And then we just recently, a few verses back, we read the reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, Ete Chamsa Kalapunsa, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And Parashar Muni has given us the qualifications of the Supreme Lord, Ashwarasya Samagrasya. So we have all these references. So that references we can, let the other people know that, okay, the scriptures are clearly saying that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whenever we come across this kind of argument from others which says this is your interpretation, we say, no, it is not our interpretation. It is given in the scriptures. This is how we can explain to them that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Let's see next verse number 72. Tena asi Krishna rupe karena avatara eyartha shloke dekhi ki ara vichara. Translation. He or Narayana incarnates as Lord Krishna. This is the meaning of the verse as I see it. There is no need for further consideration. See, some more argument. coming from others, so we have to be prepared, right? We should be able to give how, why do we say Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and give all those references that I was talking about. There are many more references, but these are the primary references we can say. And this is how we can say that we are not interpreting. We are giving you the knowledge as it is. That is the reason Srila Prabhupada, you know, titled his Bhagavad Gita as it is. When we first got access to that, we were wondering, what is the need to put as it is? And then once we started reading, especially from the introduction itself, we could understand that it is a very apt title, Bhagavad Gita as it is, which means no interpretation at all. So this verse tells us how people can interpret and say, oh, this is your interpretation, but Krishna comes from Vishnu. Verse number 73. Tare kahe kene kar kutar kanumana shastra virudhartha kabhu nahaya pramana. Translation. To such a misguided interpreter, we may reply, why should you suggest such fallacious logic? An interpretation is never accepted as evidence if it opposes the principles of scripture. It's a perfect verse, for such a comment that they make, that, oh, it is your interpretation, but actually Krishna comes from Vishnu. No, this is a perfect verse. And best thing is to let them know you are misguided. It's your interpretation. Why are you giving false logic? It doesn't make any sense at all. And we say we go very strictly by the Shastras. Whatever is given in the Shastras is what we repeat. There is no speculation, there is no interpretation, because interpretation is not accepted in the scriptures anywhere. We have not come across any verse, either in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or Caitanya Caritamrta, or any of those books of Srila Prabhupada. We've never come across any verse that says interpretation is accepted. No, not at all. If that was the case, then there would be chaos, because we know that we have four defects, right? We are in illusion, we make mistakes, we have tendency to cheat, and we have imperfect senses. So being so imperfect, how can we give interpretation to perfect knowledge? No, that is not possible. The perfect knowledge comes down as it is from the perfect source. Verse 74. Anuvadam anukatvatu na videyam udirayet na hi alabhaspadam kinchit kutrachit pratitishthati. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. One should not state a predicate before its subject, for it cannot thus stand without proper support. Purport. The rhetorical rule appears in the Ekadashi Tattva 13th canto in connection with the metaphorical use of words. An unknown object should not be put before the known subject, because the object has no meaning if the subject is not first given. When I came across this verse when I was preparing for this lecture, I had to run to my husband. I'm like, what is this? Subject, predicate, rhetorical rule, metaphorical use of words. What is all this? This is very complicated. And he explained it very, very nicely. All he said was, now there are some more verses on this same topic. And so it is like a summary of these verses, 76 and all. So he said that the subject and predicate, they are grammatical definitions that we have to understand from the beginning and end of the sentence. It is these grammatical definitions, they are there for the beginning and end of the sentence. So subject is the beginning and predicate is the end. So it is like the horse and the carriage, right? Both are needed, right? Just the horse, no. Just the carriage, no. Both are necessary. So where it says this rhetorical rule, which means it is a formal rule. That is a formal rule, yeah? The connection in the use of words when comparing. So the subject has to be unique and it has to be followed by the object. And the example is, it is given like, I explained the horse and the carriage. So we talk about the horse first, and then we talk about the carriage, and they are both interrelated. Verse number 75. Anuvada na kahiya na kahi vidhiya, age anuvada kahi paschada vidhiya. Translation. If I do not state a subject, I do not state a predicate. First, I speak the former, and then I speak the latter. Same thing, like horse and carriage. So we cannot have one without the other. Verse number 76. विधेय कहिए तारे ये वस्तु अज्ञात अनुवाद कही तारे यही है अज्ञात. Translation. The predicate of a sentence is what is unknown to the reader, whereas the subject is what is known to him, right? So the subject here, let's take example of horse and carriage. The subject is horse. Yes, we know there's a horse, but we don't know the predicate, that is the carriage. We still don't know about it, right? So the subject is, you can say, is beginning, and it is linked to the predicate, and predicate is revealed afterwards. So first we know horse, the subject, and then we know the predicate, which is the carriage. Verse number 77. Yache kahi ei vipra parama pandita vipra anuvada ihara vidheya panditya. Translation. For example, we may say, this Vipra is a greatly learned man. In this sentence, the Vipra is the subject and the predicate is his erudition. Very, very simple. How nicely explained. So just like we can say, talk about subject as Dhruva Maharaj. And then we can say the predicate as forest. So we can say Dhruva Maharaj was very determined to go to the forest. So Dhruva becomes the subject and forest becomes the predicate. Verse number 78. Vipratva vikhyata tara panditya agnata ateva vipra age panditya paschata. Translation. The man's being a vipra is known, but his erudition is unknown. Therefore, the person is identified first and his erudition later. So, similarly, Dhruva is known, but his goal was unknown, like his goal was to go to the forest. 79. Teche enha avatara sabha hailagnata kara avatara ei vastu avignata. Translation. In the same way, all these incarnations were known, but whose incarnations they are was unknown. See, this is the reason why so many verses are about subject and predicate. So here he says that incarnations were known, but whose incarnations they are unknown. So subject was there, but predicate was missing. So there's a good comparison you can say. You see, people have heard about different incarnations, but they don't know that from whom they have come, who is the source of these incarnations. That is why it is very, very important to take knowledge, bona fide knowledge, and more important is to spread this knowledge. When we explain this knowledge to others, then the others also benefit, and then their doubts are removed, their ignorance is removed, and they can use their intelligence to contemplate on that knowledge that we give them. So preaching is very, very important. Verse number 80. Ete shabde avatarera age anuvada purushera amshapache videya samvada. Translation. First, the word ete or these establishes the subject or the incarnations. Then plenary portions of the Purusha avatars follows as the predicate. You see, subject is incarnations. That comes first. Their qualification being plenary portion is the predicate. So first we're talking about incarnations and then explaining that they are plenary portions of the Supreme Lord. 81. Excuse me. Teche Krishna avatara bhitera hailagnata tanahara vishesha jnana sei avignata. Translation. In the same way, when Krishna was first counted among the incarnations, specific knowledge about him was still unknown. Here is another reference that we can explain and say, look, yes, Krishna was mentioned among the avatars, about amongst the incarnations, but the specific knowledge was still unknown. The predicate was still unknown. What is that? That Krishna is the source, right? That Krishna, uh, basically, we can say this is the reason why Krishna was first counted as incarnation. That, okay, this is a subject, and then specific knowledge which was not given, but now with the scriptures from the Shastras, we can understand the position of Lord Shri Krishna. 82. Ataiva Krishna Shabda Age Anuvada Swayam Bhagavata Piche Videya Samvada. Translation. Therefore, first the word Krishna appears as the subject, followed by the predicate describing him as the original personality of Godhead. So here Krishna is a subject and his qualification as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the predicate. So here is another reference that tells us, yes, even though Krishna's name is, counted among incarnations, but he is the source of all incarnations. Verse number 83. Krishnara Swayam Bhagavata Iha Haila Sadhya Swayam Bhagavanaira Krishnatva Haila Badhya. Translation. This establishes that Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. The original personality of Godhead is therefore necessarily Krishna. Very, very clear. Some more reference. Krishna is the Supreme Lord. There should be no doubt at all. People may argue and they may want to prove that they are right, but we must always back up our preaching with references from the scripture. Verse 84. Krishna yadi amsha haita amshi narayana tabe viparita haita sutera vachana. Translation. Had Krishna been the plenary portion and Narayana the primeval Lord, the statement of Sutta Goswami would have been reversed. That's obvious, right? So Sutta Goswami, being an acharya in the parampara, he is speaking based on references from the scriptures. He is not changing the knowledge. He is not adding his own knowledge. He is not saying, okay, in my opinion or according to me. No. If the reference is Krishna is not the plenary portion of Narayana, then that is what he said. He clearly said that Krishna is the source of Narayana. So the beauty of parampara is that there's no addition, subtraction, division, or multiplication. No, it comes down as it is. There is no change, and that is why the authenticity of the data is maintained in the parampara. And so here we can see Sutta Goswami is speaking as it is, as he heard it from Sukadev Goswami, while Sukadev Goswami was explaining the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. Verse number 85. Narayana Amshiye Swayam Bhagavana Tena Shri Krishna Aiche Karita Vyakhyana. Translation. Thus he would have said, Narayana, the source of all incarnations, is the original personality of Godhead. He has appeared as Sri Krishna. This is what, Sutta Goswami would have said. No, he didn't say that because he knew he is speaking from the scriptures. These would have been the words of Sutta Goswami, but Sutta Goswami is not saying this. He's going as per the Shastras, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Lord Vishnu is his plenary portion. So many references are there, for those who believe otherwise. With these references, their doubts can be removed and it'll be easy to convince them. The last verse for today, number 86. Brahma Pramada Vipralipsa Karanapa Thava Arsha Vigna Vakya Nahi Dosha Ei Saba. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Mistakes, illusions, cheating, and defective perception do not occur in the sayings of the authoritative sages. Very, very powerful. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam has listed the avatars, the plenary expansions of the Purusha, and Lord Krishna appears among them. But the Bhagavatam further explains Lord Krishna's specific position as a supreme personality of Godhead. Since Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, reason and argument establish that his position is always supreme. Had Krishna been a plenary expansion of Narayana, the original verse would have been differently composed. Indeed, its order would have been reversed. But there cannot be mistakes, illusion, cheating, or imperfect perception in the words of liberated sages. See, this is very, very, very important. That is why Srila Prabhupada stressed the importance of disciplic succession, bona fide disciplic succession, bona fide parampara in the very first book, Bhagavad Gita, very clearly. And he explains it based on what Krishna said. Evam parampara praptam. Krishna himself, had a bona fide spiritual master, Sandipani Muni. When he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he accepted a bona fide Guru, Ishvara Puri. So that is how, even by setting an example, the Supreme Lord is showing that it is important to follow a bona fide disciplic succession. Why? Because there are no mistakes, no illusion, no cheating, no imperfect perception in what they say. They are saying as it is. I remember we started preaching in Atlanta in 92. And then, of course, we went back to India and then came back again to Atlanta. Guru Maharaj sent us back saying that, no, you go and preach in Atlanta. So when we came back, we were living in Dunwoody Park, and there we started our Bhagavad Gita classes. And the very first time Guru Maharaj came to Atlanta, he never visited Atlanta because besides Geet Govind and I, there were no more disciples, no one there. So it wasn't worthwhile for him to come all the way from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta for two. So we would go to Washington, D.C. every year when he would come there twice a year. So then, but in 1999, when we told him that, we had a group of aspiring disciples, and so he came. And the very first program we had was in the clubhouse of Dunwoody Park Apartments. And over there, Guru Maharaj was very surprised, he was very happy to see the house full. The whole clubhouse was jam-packed and there were people standing outside, all very eager to hear Bhagavad Gita. Now, these were the students who were coming to the regular classes. After Guru Maharaj left Atlanta, when we had the first Bhagavad Gita class after he left Atlanta, all of them were saying, "Oh, what? We were surprised. Whatever y'all were teaching us is exactly what your guru is saying." Exactly. That is what we are trying to say. We don't change anything. We give the same knowledge. And they were very happy that whatever they've been hearing all these months is exactly the same knowledge they heard from Gopal Krishna Maharaj. There was no difference at all. And that is how it should be. When we preach, we do not give our own interpretation. We give the knowledge as it is to others. Then what happens? The potency of that knowledge can change the heart of that other living being. So here it's saying that there cannot be mistakes, illusion, cheating, or imperfect perception in the words of liberated sages. Therefore, there is no mistake in this statement that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Sanskrit statements of Srimad Bhagavatam are all transcendental sounds. Srila Vyasadeva revealed these statements after perfect realization, and therefore they are perfect. For liberated sages like Vyasadeva never commit errors in their rhetorical arrangements. Unless one accepts this fact, there is no use in trying to obtain help from the revealed scriptures. So, what is the first qualification? We must accept bona fide authority. Brahma, like it's a Brahma, refers to false knowledge or mistakes such as accepting a rope as a snake or an oyster shell as gold. Pramad refers to inattention or misunderstanding of reality, and Vipralipsa is a cheating propensity. Karanabhatva refers to imperfectness of the material senses. There are many examples of such imperfection. The eyes cannot see that which is very distant or very small. One cannot even see his own eyelid, which is the closest thing to his eye. And if one is disturbed by a disease like jaundice, he sees everything to be yellow. Similarly, the ears cannot hear distant sounds. Since the personality of Godhead and his plenary portions and self realized devotees are all transcendently situated, they cannot be misled by such deficiencies. You see, this is how the authenticity of the data is maintained by the parampara, by the strict disciplic succession. No mistakes, illusions, cheating, or defective perception, right? Why? Because the devotees who are coming in strict disciplic succession, they follow the acharyas, the previous acharyas, and they do not concoct or they do not speculate. This is very, very important. We should not say, oh, in my opinion, according to me, or I think. No, who are we? No, we are imperfect. We cannot give perfect knowledge. No speculation. We have already learned, all these verses about Krishna being the Supreme Lord, about the incarnations, about the plenary portions, and Srila Prabhupada has given detailed info about all this, right? People say that Krishna appeared as one of the 10 incarnations. Yes, but he came in his original form when he came 5,000 years ago. He came in his original form as Krishna. So, what do we learn from this last verse of today? That one cannot find any mistakes or errors or any cheating propensity in the scriptures. Why? Because they are the words of the Supreme Lord and his pure devotees who are coming down in strict disciplic succession. Vyasadev, he gave us Vedic knowledge which is perfect. Why? Because he's a literary incarnation of Krishna. He gave us perfect knowledge. So how can we say that it is imperfect? There's no way Vyasadev can commit any mistake. He's a literary incarnation of Krishna, right? So what it boils down to is that we must have faith in the scriptures, and we must have faith if the scriptures say Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, he is the supreme personality of Godhead. Otherwise, no amount of reading or hearing is going to help, right? Prabhupada says Brahm. Brahm means false knowledge or mistake. It's a nice analogy that he gives, that we think that a rope is a snake, right? Or we think oyster is gold. No. And what is, he refers to these three words. He talks about Brahm, and then he talks about Pramad, which is inattention or misunderstanding, right? If we are inattentive in hearing, and also, then we will misunderstand the scriptures. If there is no attention, no attentiveness while hearing, then there can be misunderstanding. Very important to follow Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Then there will be no fear of misunderstanding or mistake. Then we won't do that. And then he talks about Vipralipsa, which is a cheating propensity. Why is it said that human beings have a tendency to cheat? That tendency is there. That doesn't mean that all human beings cheat. Tendency is there, but one may not cheat, but one may cheat. So we have to be very, very careful. We do not cheat in our sadhana. When we are doing our sadhana bhakti, when we are doing our bhajana kriya, we should not cheat. We should be very, very attentive in chanting. We should be very attentive in hearing and reading. We should be very attentive in preparing, bhoga for the Lord, offering to the Lord. We have to be very attentive even in preaching. So that is very, very important, that careful that we do not cheat in our spiritual life. Of course, not even in material life. And then he says karana patva, which means imperfect senses. And very nice example Prabhupada gives. We cannot even see our eyelids, right? We cannot see, even though so close to the eyes, we cannot see. That's imperfect senses. We cannot see beyond the wall. We cannot see something that's very far away. Like, for instance, if the computer is far away, we can't even read. That is imperfect senses. So these are the examples that is given. But Krishna and his plenary portions, they are perfect, right? And Krishna's self realized devotees are also perfect, they are transcendental. So the pure devotees, they cannot be misled by these deficiencies. No, they do not have any imperfections. And this is what Prabhupada is talking about, pure devotees. Why is it that in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 34, it says, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashrina sevaya upadyakshanti gyanam gnaninas tattva darshinaha. That means he has seen the truth. He does not have any mistakes. He has seen the truth. The bona fide spiritual master is at that level. Like Krishna says, within I am as Paramatma, and without I am as the bona fide spiritual master. So, this is what we learn from these few verses that we read today. And I want to know if anyone has any